Continued in Limpopo today. This time people jostled for a position trying to get into a venue in Mokopane. A committee is of course touring the country after being instructed by Parliament to ascertain whether a review of Section 25 of the Constitution is necessary to make it possible for the state to expropriate land in the national interest without compensation. To discuss, we're now joined by Lawson Naidoo from the Council for the Advancement of the Constitution, or CASAC. Lawson, thank you for being with us. Firstly, remind us where CASAC stands on Section 25. Does it need to be changed or not in the first place?
Well, I think it's the view of CASAC as well as a number of other legal professionals in the country that the Constitution, in terms of Section 25, the property clause, makes it possible for land to be expropriated without compensation in certain circumstances. The Constitution does not say that compensation need always be paid. It simply says that the compensation to be paid for land that is expropriated needs to be just and equitable in the circumstances of a particular transaction, taking into account a number of factors, including the use of the land, the manner in which it was acquired, the public interest as well as the private interest of the holder of the land. So those factors together could mean that a piece of land that is earmarked for redistribution would attract no commercial value or market value and can therefore be expropriated without compensation. The issue is that that matter has not been tested before the courts to provide greater clarity in terms of the circumstances in which that can happen.
You would have thought that maybe the state would have tried by now. I mean, what is the situation? We were running a story about people who have legitimate land claims. Their families were kicked off the land. What does the state do in circumstances like that to get the land back for them if they are trying to do what we keep on talking about, restitution?
Well, I think this is part of the complexity of the issue. These are complex issues that relate not just to one aspect of land, but you're talking now specifically about land restitution, people who are seeking to claim back a title to land that was unlawfully taken away from their forebears. That's an issue of land restitution. There's been a process in place since the 90s. It has moved very, very slowly. The pace of giving back land to people who are from whom it was unfairly taken has taken far too long. So that's the one aspect, but that's been an ongoing process. There is currently a new bill before Parliament seeking to amend the process by which land restitution takes place to try and speed up that process. But the debate also concerns other aspects of land reform, which includes redistribution of land as well as dealing with the issue of security of tenure, in particular for farm workers.
Are you going to give a submission to the Commission at all?
We have not made a submission to the Commission. I think there have been hundreds of thousands of submissions that have been made, and I think this we would have probably simply repeated what others have said. I think that what is important here is the manner in which the process is conducted. That Parliament is going out to all 9 provinces in the country to hear the views of ordinary South Africans on each of these aspects of land reform. And many people simply see it as one particular issue. But as I've tried to set out, it's much more complex than that, and we can't have a one-size-fits-all solution for the problem of land reform in South Africa. We need to identify what the particular challenges are in an urban environment, in a peri-urban environment, as well as in a rural and agricultural setting that would require different solutions to those complex problems. And hopefully this parliamentary committee will get to the bottom of that as part of its mandate.
Although Motlanthe led another commission or inquiry that went out and looked at those issues, do you think it's at least useful to go out and get the opinions of ordinary people on the ground? I mean, we saw people jostling, queuing to get into the venue today in Limpopo.
Well, I think, in some senses, that's a very healthy sign that we have a vibrant democracy. People are eager to have their voices heard. They have something to say on this very, very important issue of land reform in South Africa. Land was, is something that is, there was a hallmark of colonialism and apartheid, taking away land from black people in this country. So it's an issue that is understandably highly emotive. People want to have this opportunity to have their say. And I think Parliament has done well to reach out to those people and provide them with the platform to air their grievances and to tell parliamentarians what they believe those solutions are. You're correct that former President Kgalema Motlanthe, operating under Parliament's high-level panel, conducted a similar exercise quite recently. But this is a much broader and mandated process, mandated by the National Assembly to report back to Parliament by September this year, with a view towards taking decisions that will lead to a speedier implementation of land reform in South Africa. Former President Motlante's panel recommended certain activities which will form part of this review process and will hopefully feed into that.
All right, so you're saying it's useful, but listening to the rhetoric today, we were there on the ground, white farmers saying they died for the land, black people saying no, in fact they did. They are the ones who've propped up white farmers. Could this exacerbate already strained race relations sometimes? And then, of course, we have the whole issue of EFF, its involvement yesterday, resented by COPE, and no wonder, I guess, this is going to become something that can be harnessed by politicians.
Well, it is a divisive factor in our society. It is about the fundamental issue of redress of the apartheid legacy in South Africa. So it is going to divide people in the way that it has done, and that we've seen demonstrated in the last few days. But I don't think we should allow that to tell us that this process isn't a worthwhile one, that it isn't worthwhile gathering those views from the South African people, diverse though they may be. Ultimately, Parliament is going to have to weigh up the input that it receives and come up with solutions that address the needs of the majority of the people of South Africa, whilst on the other hand, not alienating others that may disagree with any outcome that may emanate from this process.
What outcome do you expect? I mean, the Constitution may be changed, but if you believe that it's valid already for no compensation, then that doesn't matter very much, does it?
Well, the Constitution may well not need to be changed, but, we have other pieces of legislation. There's an expropriation act that dates back to the 1970s that probably needs to be updated to bring it into line with the kind of values and focus of the Constitution under which we live now. And so those are other mechanisms that this parliamentary process can look into to provide direction for future land reform implementation. Similarly, with the Restitution of Land Amendment Bill that I spoke about recently, the security of tenure legislation that is in place, I think all of these pieces of legislation need to be looked at separately to identify how they can be improved in order to speed up the return of land to people in South Africa, to allow people to live lives in dignity with access to land and being able to house themselves and their families.
All right, thank you very much for your time this evening. That was Lawson Naidoo from the Council for the